We begin this new worship series, Joy Changes Joy. We begin this new sermon series. We begin the fall season. Children are going back to school and all sorts of other things are taking place, even if we are still having a hard time telling what day of the week it might be. It's a very strange fall, so to speak. So we are seeking to find places of great joy where we can rejoice. Joy changes joy. And we are turning to Paul's letter to the churches, the people of faith in Philippians, in the Christian Testament. And we're going to be living here with Paul for a while. We're going to be experiencing the word lifted up with different voices. And we're going to be exploring what it is that Paul was doing, what it is that Paul is offering to us, how God is working through these texts to lift and change our lives in this moment. So as we're thinking about today, community and joy in community, I've surrounded myself with some things that are important because, we bring with us a community at all times. There is no such thing as the individual in the sense that we operate in a vacuum, right? We all are interconnected in some way, even those of us that may have been perceived as raised by wolves. We have a community within us, our hearts and our minds, but there is also the community we interact with. It has even been argued that we as an individual do not understand ourselves until we are in relationship with another. Paul is arguing, Paul is saying, Paul is giving us this gift of relationship with another. And in the language he uses, he's inspiring us to be in relationship with each other. I thank my God every time I remember you. You plural, not an individual, but this great community that he rejoices in. Constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you because of your sharing in the gospel from the first day until now. I give thanks for the community. And so I surround myself with things to remind me of the community in a lot of ways. I have my celebration stole because it is something that I like to pull out and wear when there are things to be excited about. And this is a time of rejoicing. Paul says we are in a season of rejoicing, even though he is speaking to a congregation or a collection of house churches, actually, that might not always have something to rejoice in. This isn't about being happy all the time. I like to tell people that brownies make me happy. They do. Brownies make me happy. Large quantities of brownies might make me very happy, but it also will give me quite the upset stomach. But at some point, the happiness of brownies will pass. The joy in community that Paul talks about, it's not just a pan of brownies. So I have brought some stuff in that makes me quite excited. First is this. This is the congregation's guest book. I found this a little while back, leafed through it, just happened to open to a page, and lo and behold, July 15th, 2001, David S. and Brooke Kays. The handwriting is neat, so I know I didn't put it in there. We visited. We were members of a congregation of faith in another part of Hampton Roads here, but God was calling us into something else. And so we were looking for a community that God would reveal to be part of that next step. And so we came and we visited. It's amazing to find ourselves still written in the book, so to speak. And written in the book is what we are. When Paul says, I thank my God every time I remember you, yes, he is speaking to a specific group of people in a historical context, in a Roman military garrison town that became a very important city But because we understand Scripture to be a living thing, Paul is, for us, envisioning this community, this congregation of faith, this group that is currently in diaspora and yet gathering when safe and appropriate, this group that is meeting in different times and places and yet is also finding events that we can gather around in a specific moment. Paul is grateful for you and me. I'm part of this as well, but it says, I am grateful for you. Constantly praying with joy for everyone. So we rejoice in community. There is joy in community. The relationship that is between us, the way that we interact, and all that we bring with us. Sometimes we get a little, we're worried about our background, our past, our history, a little sketchy, The long-haired kid in high school. Got to watch out for those ones, right? But we bring with us a lot of history, and Paul says, in the community that is gathered, we give thanks for everyone. So I have some of my history. Actually, I brought it with me. You used to be able to get these things quite easily. There's different groups that would make them. This is the Cat's Meow is this particular group. I don't even know if there's groups that make these anymore, but I've got a small collection of these that are part of my history that I've brought in. I give thanks to God for the communities of faith that, whether they welcomed me for one Sunday 19 plus years ago without knowing what the next week might bring, or those like Speedway Christian Church that hosted me or housed me or welcomed me as a student minister for a year and a half. There's a lot of trust that goes into that sort of thing. Or here, Westside Christian Church in Portsmouth. This one was done by another company. I don't see the name real quick, but Westside is where I preached my first sermon. I give thanks to that congregation for the risk that they took on me. This is Oak Grove United Methodist Church out in Chesapeake. Hometown Collectibles is the group that put this one together. It's where I made a covenant commitment. It was a congregation that welcomed and embraced and challenged as well. And I have this one, Milford Mill United Methodist Church, R&R Creations. This is going back. This is my hometown church. It's where I grew up. I went initially because it was where my family went. And then as I got older, I committed myself to the various missions and ministries that were going on. Give thanks. I rejoice in my prayers and in my thoughts for congregations that invested in one like me, for those who embraced the gospel in the moments that they had, not knowing fully what the next moment might bring. Paul is telling the congregation of faith, the communities of Philippi, the house churches, that they have been busy at work since the beginning. They have been about the mission and the ministry of Jesus Christ. This is an important thing for Paul. Proclaiming the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus the Christ is an important thing for Paul because that is the core of the good news. When we rejoice in community that is grounded in that gospel message, we aren't just living, speaking, sharing, or whatever. We are enacting two interconnected, non-divisible ways of being in Paul's mind and in the way that we understand ourselves as church. Sin is forgiven for everyone, and hope of resurrection is offered. Crucifixion and resurrection. Rejoice in community. Paul says that even though he is imprisoned, which seemed to happen to Paul a fair amount in his life, even though he is imprisoned, even though he is in places of despair, even though he can't go where he wants to go, can you imagine that? Not being able to go where you want to go, do what you want to do, whether it is out of respect for others in the community or it is in response to external forces. Even though Paul is in prison, he gives thanks for the community. He rejoices in the community. The people of faith who have been faithfully living out that crucifixion, resurrection story, forgiveness and hope. It's worth celebrating. Rejoice in forgiveness and hope. That's good news. It's good news for a community to live out forgiveness and hope, to rejoice. And this is my prayer, Paul says. Now, Paul has said he's been praying already, and he's used language in the Greek that indicates that the prayer is a supplication, that he is in need of something, and he is in need of the community. He is desiring the koinonia. He has felt a deficit in his life. And he knows that the community that God is working through is a place where that deficit can be met by the surplus of faith in God, by forgiveness and hope. And so he concludes this opening thing with a prayer for the people of faith and a prayer for us as we rejoice as a community. Even in our scattered diaspora living and learning, we are a community. We understand ourselves in relationship to others. And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight to help you determine what is best. And it continues, that your love may overflow with knowledge and full insight. Elsewhere in Paul's writings, he talks about seeing in a mirror dimly, and at some point when God's perfection comes into our lives, into this world, we will fully understand things. In this moment in the congregations of Philippi, as the letter is passed around and shared in the community, as it is copied and recopied, we understand that Paul is not just praying for a group of people in a time and a place, which he is. He's praying for us. He is modeling a prayer for us as we rejoice in the communities that we are part of, that we are responsible to, that we are gifted to be agents of forgiveness and hope in. He is praying that the love, philia, this brotherly, sisterly, this non-gendered, deep, powerful, emotional, divine relationship love might grow, might become overflowing in knowledge and full insight. Paul is asking us to rejoice as a community, to be part of his rejoicing. Not to focus fully on the things that are no longer the same. We grieve them. We grieve change. But this letter in its fullness is a letter of joy, and on this day we rejoice in community, the moment that we have been given to be together in whatever ways we have been given to be together. I miss some of the times I had with those congregations that have shaped me, that I carry in here. I give thanks for the moment I had, the way that they loved and invested in me. Do not seek to go back to what was. Paul is grounding us in this moment in the community we are part of now. I give thanks today for you, for this community of faith, for the ways that we love. And I pray in this moment, on this day, that our love might overflow, that we might be church in this moment, that we might come to a fuller knowledge and the fullest insight by work of the Spirit as we live out forgiveness of sins and resurrection hope. There's a lot to celebrate in this community. Rejoice. Rejoice. Rejoice in community. Thanks be to God, and amen.